Hi, guys, and welcome to another Loving to Be Me Roundtable with Vanessa Couto, who is amazing, and she calls herself an astro coach and artist. I was just talking to her about this and getting the scoop on what that means and why it's so important. So before we get into this, Vanessa, introduce yourself, tell us a little bit about what you do, and where we can find you and all that good stuff, and then we'll just riff.
Jump right in. Well, I'm Vanessa Couto. Thank you for having me here. This is really cool to have this conversation. I'm an astrological coach, meaning I bring in astrology as my main tool to help you work in finding yourself and your purpose and where you are in life and how you're developing. But I also bring in my counseling background, dream work, storytelling, and art as well to put it all together. And my website is vanessacouto.com, and Couto, C-O-U-T-O.
Couto, as I was just saying, like Clouseau, Couto.
Yeah.
That's how I'm gonna always remember you by that. But you're not a what? I don't even remember Inspector Clouseau. He was the guy that did the Pink Panther.
I love it.
We're a little bit more serious than that today. I know, I love him. Yeah, awesome. Well, so thank you so much for joining me. I wanted to dig in a little bit and talk about things like, because you're working with astrology, and you're working with some of my favorite buzzwords like sort of self-realization, self-acceptance. I'm big on loving. I call this loving to be me, and talking about full-time love, and why is this stuff so important? And astrology, as I was sort of saying to you before, it's one of those things where we have so many tools in the world that can either help us accept who we are, or sort of give us an excuse to be who we are, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about why astrology, why you use astrology. And you mentioned some other really cool things too that you mix in there. How do you feel about all of this stuff, and the difference between the way we used to see astrology and how it's changing, because I feel like it's becoming more realistic, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. Well, my own personal journey with astrology kind of started when I was a child, and for whatever reason, I found out sun sign. I was asking all my friends, "What's your sun sign? What's your sun sign?" And I think I got, as a child and in my early teens, I could see the correlation between a sun sign and a person's way of being and what made them tick. And that was the trigger. That was this is really interesting. But it was really my early mid-20s that I had my chart done first time. And that just blew my mind. And I was like, wow, how can they know all these things about me that I don't even know how to formulate in my own mind? And that's kind of really what prompted me to study more in more depth. I was already interested in psychology, but when I actually did study astrology deeper, and the astrology I ended up studying and was introduced to was psychological astrology. So there was already a lot of C.G. Jung's work mixed in, and the talk about archetypes, and I drank that all like it was the best wine ever. And so I think in many ways the change in astrology, I mean, without going too deep into the actual history, because it's super, super long. But I think especially in the 20th century, and I think in many ways, thanks to C.G. Jung, that it has become more a psychological tool than people realize it could be. So there now, out of that, many different schools of astrology kind of took shape. But so I think that's why now we see more this eclectic mix of astrology, from evolutionary astrology to, psychological astrology, and off you go. But in essence, in many ways, I think even in the very early stages of astrology, as sort of an observation of the heavens, and they were looking for signs, they were looking for patterns, and in many ways looking for, it has its base in divination. But in some point, too, people were trying to understand life and pattern and cycles through astrology. So for me, the way I like to bring in astrology is that it's one of the many tools, because I'm a firm believer that there are many roads that lead to Rome. It's like you just got to get your pick, however you want to travel.
Right.
And astrologist to me is a symbolic language that helps us understand cycles. And so I think when you look at a birth chart, which is really the base of it all, that's the map of your psyche to me. That's a snapshot of like, this makes you tick. These are your growing edges. There are some talents you have. Now, as I tell my clients, is as a guide, as a roadmap for your life, it doesn't mean that I'm saying, hey, this is going to happen or that. It's more like, hey, there's a 5-star hotel down the street. You can go there, experience the lovely bed and the comfort of the sheets, but you have to live it. It's your experience.
I like that. Yeah. It's interesting because, like I talk about this stuff like based in my own experiences. And I know that like when I was younger and I would read my horoscope, right. And I would take it and I would say, oh, I'm a Sagittarius. And, that means I'm fiery, or that means I'm this, or that means I'm that. And I would use it as kind of, I don't want to say like an excuse, but I took kind of the very basic, basis of astrology or whatever. And I think also it has to do with kind of as we grow and like, as like the world is shifting. But for a while, I decided who I was based on my astrological sign and what it said about it. You know what I mean? So, well, you're a Sagittarius, so you're very fiery. Oh, you're a Sagittarius, so you're an actress. You're like, you're ugly, you're this, you're that. And I was doing all this stuff. And then the more I sort of got enraptured by like the spiritual path and exactly what you're saying of like understanding my nature, like understanding my psyche, like my soul, because that was the other thing is, I started to sort of feel like my psyche again was just sort of this like blanket thing. Like if you feel this way, you're crazy. Or if you feel this way, that's because you're, I don't know, like you're bipolar or you're this. Like there's so many labels that we throw around. And then when I actually got interested in understanding, like, who am I? How did I get here? Why am I here? What am I learning? Like when I sort of like, instead of just saying, I guess maybe thinking of it in terms of cars, right? Like instead of just like, I'm a Subaru, or I'm a Toyota, I'm more interested in like, what's under the hood? Like what's under the hood? Yeah. Like what's all the, like the more complex stuff? Because once I learned about astrology in another way, I began to see and understand, oh my gosh, there's so much more to me than just being a Sagittarius. I have a Scorpio moon. I have a Leo rising. I have Chiron in a certain place. I have this in a certain place, and I saw this whole thing that expanded my own understanding of myself. You know what I mean? And it became, instead of something that sort of limited my perception of who I was, it allowed me to get underneath and kind of appreciate myself. Do you?
Absolutely. And I think as you were talking, I was thinking that it's almost as if there are two kinds of astrology. And I think there are two kinds of experience people have. Even a lot of skeptical people, they know their sun sign. So that's kind of an interesting thing. Right. So it really got into the culture, especially in the 20th century. But one thing that's interesting I find about sun signs is, like you said, I knew I was a Sagittarius, and these are things, and like, if funny enough, you're a Sag and I'm a Gemini, which is right the opposite sign. But, so I think the sun sign is the entry, it's the doorway that people can, or if they choose to go in through or not. And you can be totally fine. And you can find quite a lot about through the sun sign. But then you also meet a lot of people who are like, oh, I'm a Leo, but I don't feel like the description of Leo fits me. Well, because there are many other planets in that birth chart that have something to say about your nature, just as you pointed out. A rising sign Leo would be very different than a rising sign Cancer. It would make your Sagittarius very different.
Right.
But I think the And so I think once you cross that threshold and you have your birth chart read and you really start getting in deeper, you see that astrology is super multi-layered.
Right.
I mean, even just the knowledge that you are a Sagittarius, you get to know that it's so much deeper. Now, in doing work with clients and even in my own experience with astrology, what I've noticed is that even if all you know are your sun sign, in some ways, the sun sign says, this is who you are, air quotes here.
Right.
But in some ways, it's what you're becoming more deeply. And so all the other planets in the chart, in some ways, it's like Harry Potter, you had the classmates that were friends, and some classmates that were more challenging. The planets are the same. It's it's a play.
I love that you just used Harry Potter, because I always talk about stories and things like that. And so I love that it is kind of like that we each have our own story, and like I like it so much because it just feels so much more personal, right? Like, I think up till now, because earlier before we started, you're talking, and you were talking a little bit about, you said some of the buzzwords that make me get all excited, like self-realization and sort of self-acceptance and self-understanding and all of these things. And it's like, in order for us to do that, we kind of have to look at the whole story, right? And like
look at the whole story, yeah.
And
all the planets are the players in that story. Now, the other element, for an example, it's interesting that you said knowing that you were Sagittarius, it was so key, and then you start exploring spirituality. That's another level of Sagittarius that they can move towards.
Right.
And so each sign, each planet, the whole configuration, it's a spiral of development. You enter through the sun sign, let's say, and then you just go down further, deeper and deeper. I mean, even to this day, I don't know how long I've been studying and doing astrology. I look at my own chart and I'm like, oh my God, that's what it means. And so ever deeper layers of knowing. So it's really peeling the onion, constantly peeling this forever onion.
Yeah. Oh, I like that. And I like that you did the like spiraling downwards, because that's one of the biggest, I think literally one of the biggest realizations I had recently, as sort of an aspiring, I don't want to call myself enlightened, but as an aspiring enlightened being or whatever, someone that strives to know myself as best I can, I think is a better way of saying it. I began to recognize and understand that here we are in the middle, and it's like we have two directions we can go. Like, we can go up or we can go down. And so often I find that we're reaching, like we're so busy looking up. We're looking like ahead, and we're looking up, and we're looking to God, or we're looking outside of ourselves. Like, at least I am, where I forgot that actually, in order to properly understand myself, or become my true self, or unveil my true self, or whatever it is, the direction I was going was down, not up. And it's like a digging, and that's why they say, dig one hole and dig it deep, to find the pearl. You dig down into your being, like into the depths of your soul, to find the information. And yet it brings us up. You know what I mean? Like
I feel like it's like the more you dig down, you actually sort of come up on the top. So instead of just reaching out, you should go the other way. But I think culturally, as a Western culture, we have this really I won't say pet peeve, but this sort of negative image of what is to go down. Because for centuries and centuries, the church told us going down is going to hell. Who wants to go down? No one wants to go down. So we got to go up the whole time. And hey, this life is no good. You better just do your bit, die, and hope for the best after, right? So I think it's a whole new understanding that I think about this a lot when, Jesus said, the kingdom is right here, already right here. And I think that's what we're waking up now to, this like, oh, right. It's right in this here. So the up or the down it's right here. It's right already level.
Ding, their buzzers like, yes, that's it. Congratulations. You've won the golden ticket. That is,
Yeah.
I'm so, yeah. I mean, if someone's listening to this, you can't see, if you're watching it, you can see I'm like dancing in my seat. If you're listening, you can hear the glee in my voice because I'm so excited that you're saying this because it's everything that I've been thinking about myself and experiencing because I realize how often like it's such a misconception that we have all these like terms like we're broken down, like you have to break down to get stronger, or like you have to dig deep. And yeah, it feels like if we go down, we're sort of we're it's negative.
It's a bad thing.
Yeah, it's a
Yeah.
bad thing. Like I can't tell you how often when I say, like when I talk to someone just personally and I'm like, yeah, it's been a challenging year. I've really you know, I things have been I've been really digging deep and they're like, "Oh, I'm so sorry." And I'm
Yeah.
like, "I'm not sorry. Are you kidding me? I'm so freaking excited because it means that I'm busting through something." And I think like I always think about Alice in Wonderland a lot too. And it's like you go down the rabbit hole. It doesn't make sense, right? You think you would want to go up, but when we try to go up, that messes us up because then we're reaching outside of ourselves. So that's one of the reasons why I found that I came back to this whole thing of loving to be me, because I realized how often are we like we're looking outside of ourselves, and spirituality is wonderful, but also if we're not sort of taught properly, we can forget that and be like longing. Like I don't know about you, but how often do you talk to somebody and they say like, I just want to go home, I don't like
Yes.
here.
Yeah. I think also, I think in our culture, good or bad, we have this tendency, especially with spirituality, because I think the undertone of all the spiritual New Age stuff, I think it still has its foot in the church in some ways, in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that it's out there. Heaven, good vibes, light and love is all out there.
Right.
And so I think we have such a hard time to answer, to be like Alice in Wonderland and go down. And also I think about when you look, here in Portland, we're having all these new buildings popping up everywhere. And it's really interesting because they had to dig in so deep.
Right.
Or you even see a scrap of
Yes.
what the building will be like, right? So you drive by for weeks, months, and it's just deep, 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 nothing. And then one day it's like, oh, there it is. And I think people forget that. We are so attached to this, like you have the full-on building, it's all beautiful. We forgot how long it took, what it needed to build that strong foundation for what you're showing up in the world, that you needed to dig in deep. And
Yeah.
how many stories do we know of the dark night of the soul or stuff like that,
Right. Yeah. I'm like, I'm so excited because I actually just the other day I was in New York and I was at the voiceover studio where I work out of sometimes. There was a massive skyscraper there, and what they did was, in order to demolish it, they took it down floor by floor. So
Oh, wow.
they took like I don't know how many stories. I want to say, let's say 40 stories. I have no idea, but it was like they took it 40, 39, 38, and they ripped it down
Yeah.
one by one from the top to the bottom. And the other day I looked outside and it's completely gone and they're digging deep. And I took
Yeah.
a picture of it and I put it out there, into social media land. And I said, for anybody that's going through an energetic or an emotional or spiritual sort of overhaul right now, this is what it looks like. This is what's actually going on, and you have to dig deep in order to get the foundation. And I know there's such a negative, I don't want to say negative, but there's a kind of like
Resistance.
I don't really want to do that. Like, I don't need to dig deep. I just need to get forward. You know what I mean? Like, we want to jump ahead so quickly, but we forget that we kind of have to root down. And I only teach from experience, and I would never tell anyone like, yes, this is true if I hadn't done it. And I know from my own journey that like anytime when I go through like massive growth spurts or whatever it is, or what big expansive moments, or, and I'm sure if you looked at my chart, you could be like, yep, there it is. And I know that one of them just happened because that's how I connected with you was one of those specific things where I forget what was going on. There were like 3 planets doing something. I can't remember what it was, but
it's been quite active.
so active, but there was something in particular. And I had heard it from various astrologers that this was going on. And I think I posted in your Facebook group, which we'll post the link to if you like, so people can find it. But I remember posting there saying, yeah, what is this all about? And you made this awesome video about overcoming something. Like there was a massive time to overcome like a fear or whatever it was.
I might have been talking about Saturn.
I think it was Saturn, Jupiter, and like something else. Everything was doing something at once. But it was this massive thing. And you were talking about it. And I was like, you know, it really does happen like that. And we do, in order for us to really get clear on who we are, and I'm sure you find this with astrology, and astrology has like been a massive, massive tool in my life, in my personal evolution. You know, I'm outside, I'm on the porch, and there's like chaos outside. Well, speaking of chaos, but you know, it was one of those things that helped me understand that it was okay to go down, and that in my chart, especially like in particular, there was some stuff that was like really a lot of stuff below the horizon in my chart, like almost everything actually. And I remember thinking, oh my God, that's so bad, isn't it? Like it felt so weird to have somebody say like, you are so deep, you have nothing above the horizon, like you are all underground. And I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to just keep going down. That sucks. But it's amazing when we actually can reverse the perception that's bad.
Yeah, I think that, well, there are a few things you said that touched on some key things that I think about. One is when we're going through a tough phase, I think what astrology does sometimes help is kind of give you a sense of time and a sense of cycle, that it's not all, you know, there's an end to it. There's a process.
Right.
So when I really got deep into astrology, I was about to go into, it was just before I was about to go into my Saturn return. It's a famous thing, right? And I remember, you know, reading it up and eating it up. And but even when I was going through it, it was still tough. But having the tool of astrology to kind of give me some sense of perspective was like, okay, this will end. Now, looking back and what I do now, when you have a better understanding of cycles, and I think that's the for me, what astrology can be so useful on the road to self-knowledge and self-love, is that first you get to know your own rhythms. You get to understand your own cycle. And there's a sense, I've seen this enough in clients to see that it's so true, that they feel like, I'm not crazy. There's a sense of affirmation of like, it's okay. On a cautionary side, you can't hide behind that, but at least it gives you that sense of like, it's okay. That's how I tend to approach things. But also then in looking how things are happening and evolving, even if you're going through a tough period, or sort of an expansive kind of very deep growth and going all over, you get to understand that there is a very distinct cycle for everything. So like this week, I'll be doing a talk on the lunar phases. So I've been preparing for that. And it's so clear. Like you understand that there's the growth and then there's dismantling, just like the building you saw. It was all there and then they had to take it down step by step. And now they're building the foundation. They're starting all up again.
Right.
So it's okay to go down because like the wheel of fortune in the tarot, we're going to go up.
Right. Right. And isn't it, I think it's really cool too, because it sort of, I know that like one of my things, right, and I don't know where this is in my chart, but you know, whatever, I'm a Sagittarius, I'm a Leo rising, all of these things. And just my like energetic makeup, my soul, like I am so positive. I am like full of love and joy. And I know I spent a really long time with, I don't want to say like with blinders on, but like really I was like so determined to see the positive that I had a very hard time seeing the negative. And so what that kind of did was it limited me in some ways, because I refused to accept that like I might have to go down. You know what I mean? Like I only wanted to go up. I only wanted to like receive love. Like I only wanted to see happy things. And so I was only seeing half the wheel, right? Like half the journey. Yeah. And I think that, and what's interesting about my chart, I know this just because when she did my chart, everything's below the horizon. So like I pretty much lived below the horizon, and yet I only saw what was above the surface. Like I was kind of backwards for what my chart was, which is interesting because it was very fragmented. And, you know, what's interesting about what you just said is it kind of proves the theories, right? As above, so below. What goes up must come down. The wheels on the bus go round and round.
Right. You know? And the other one, I think that's actually the continuation of as above, so below, is that as within, so without. And I think that's the real key. That's where it's the one that's usually dropped off out of that. You know, a lot of people like to say as above, so below, but the second part is as within, so without. And actually that saying comes from alchemy. And so there's this whole idea, right, in alchemy, that you have all these stages of transformation. Right. Now, interesting enough about the bottom part of the chart is that, from my understanding, that bottom part of the chart means two things. You were born at night. Most of the planets are at nighttime. So it's the foundation. But also all those houses in the bottom have to do with personal development. And so in some ways, they're all dealing with the quadrant of knowing who you are and how you're preparing to engage with the outside world. And as it sounds like, it's exactly what you're doing with your own business. You're teaching people, love who you are, get ready to engage out there.
Right, yeah.
It's not bad to have a whole bunch of planets in the bottom.
No. And see, that's why I was saying it helps you actually accept yourself and understand yourself, because when, you know, I spent much of my life sort of hating myself for being myself, you know, and I was like, I don't want to be so deep. Like, I don't want to be in this, I don't want to be this person. I want to be somebody else, you know? And the only thing that was above the horizon was Chiron, which was like at the very top. I have this very interesting thing where it's like roots of a tree. I don't know. But it's exactly, it is so perfect for who I am and what I'm doing. And it makes it very clear that what I'm doing is me, you know, and that's why after years of me chasing my own tail, trying to come up with, what do I do with my business? Like, what should I call it? What should I teach? What am I teaching? What is my purpose? All of a sudden, one day I woke up and was like, son of a gun, it's me, like loving to be me. It's developing me. It's accepting me and understanding that that's a process. So when we talk about, you know, astrology and looking into, and I mentioned having the blinders on, and I think that one of the amazing things that you're talking about is how it can actually, it shows us all of that stuff that maybe we perceived as negative that's not so negative. You know what I mean? Because like for me, I could look at my chart and say, oh my God, everything's below the surface. I'm so like, I'm too internal. I'm too much of a feeler. You know what I mean? And yet it makes me, so you're giving people, a means to actually see themselves in this beautiful way. And you use art also, which makes it like an even more accessible way of seeing yourself in this beautiful image.
Yeah, I think there's, I see it as an exploration of like we're going on a journey. I don't know. I like Italy. So I often say we're going to Italy.
I say that all the time. I'm like, come journey with me. Yeah.
Come journey, you know, there's a sense of discovery and it's ever deeper that you keep going down. One thing I have noticed in my own life and in clients is often people get really attached to a certain part of their chart. And they can live for years and years as if they're that. And so let's say it's the sun, usually people can easily be in the sun, but also sometimes could be the moon. And the other planets need, because they're archetypal symbols of different parts of your psyche, they're trying to have an expression as well. And so I think that the interesting thing is sometimes the very thing that seems very negative, that we are like so resistant to be being. And I think to me, that's the heroic journey of the sun, is that the sun is striving to become ever more so itself. And so that's why I think the language we tend to use now in this new thought, new age era, is that shine your light, shine the essence. What's in your heart? Well, what does the sun say? The sun in the chart represents that essence. It represents the core, the heart. It's the heroic journey. So in some ways, you perhaps had to go through years of hating yourself and being I don't want to be me. Because if you didn't know that feeling, how can you now teach people how to be themselves?
Right.
So the pain became the purpose of your business.
Right.
You had to gain that wisdom.
Yeah.
To pass it on.
No, and I think that's everything you're saying. It's interesting because from what I've done, I've built. I was actually thinking about it today. Like my course that I'm building, I built it on a wheel, almost like the astrological wheel. And I wasn't thinking about that until recently. It's just the hero's journey. It's the cycle. It's the
cycle.
And the chart is a circle. And I think that everything that we can do to help people sort of embrace one of the things you said at the very beginning that I really wanted to like touch on and make sure that people start to grasp and really like invite this in is the understanding all of who we are, what I mean? Not just like a piece of who we are, because for so long it was sort of like we were we didn't have permission, exactly what you're saying, like the whole chart, the whole picture. There's so much going on. And yet it can also feel maybe overwhelming for someone. So like when you look at a chart, or when you look at yourself, or when you work with someone or whatever it is, how do you keep it from feeling overwhelming? Because, like sometimes I feel like within myself and with other people, because it's the onion and, it's like we're just peeling back layer after layer after layer. I know that it's at a certain point we all get to that space of we're like, oh my God, will it just end already? You're like, I can't take this anymore. Like we hear people, I'm sure people come to you for sessions. They're like, I need your help right now because I can't take this anymore. Or like, I can't keep doing this, or what I mean.
Usually people show up in crisis, in some sort of transformation.
Like, help me. This needs to stop, or there's something going on. And I think that part of it, they come with sort of a, I'm in trouble and I need help now. Give me a solution. And people, maybe, I know it happens with me as well. Like it's sort of like a doorway in, because something brings you to the table to start learning, but maybe there's not so much of an understanding yet that it is that it is a process.
It's still a process. And I think with any sort of self-development, healing stuff that we find that now we have like such a wealth of things we can do. I think that's the shadow side of all of them, is that in many ways we're still expecting to be fixed.
Right.
So even if you go to an astrologer, you're expecting to like, tell me what's happening, tell me what the stars say, and so then I can be okay. And I think that's the challenge. I think we all have gone through that and still go through. But in essence, the way I try not to get overwhelmed, because I know that the chart, you can't really dig deep into the chart in an hour and 90 minutes. There's so much in there, and it's really, so I just try to go by What do we want to focus on that day, and what is jumping at me. And I also look at the cycles that are happening now to see where the trigger is coming from.
Mm-hmm.
And so in many ways, what I try to do in my work is to help the person gain a different perspective in the situation that's happening, kind of widen the scope. And that way I find that people can gain a little bit more confidence and feel empowered to proceed.
Right.
Because if you engage, you can engage with it from a different perspective. And that's why I kind of bring in dream and storytelling, because those are all the facets that you can work with. But it is overwhelming, because oftentimes I have times when I will look at a chart and I'm like, I have no idea where to even start. It's like I'm going around that circle and I'm like, how do I enter on this,
Right. Like where's the starting point?
Oftentimes when I find myself in that position, I look to Saturn. Saturn usually points me to, where's the fear? Where is that? The sense of insecurity, or the bony finger saying, oh, you're not good enough. Yeah, usually go through there, and you
the ghost of Christmas
or
whatever. Ghost of Christmas yet to come. I always think of it. I always think of because I like stories too, and so I often think of A Christmas Carol as like to me, it's such an obvious story. Like, it's a spiritual story. It's a Christmas story, right? But it's so obvious. It's about a guy that wants to like change his life because he's unhappy, because he's met a certain set of experiences that has brought him to where he is. So he has an awakening, and in order to free himself, he has to go back to his past, and so he returns to the past to sort of retrieve the pieces of himself and from a new perspective, and then the present, and look around and see how it's affecting him, and then sort of project into the future how he'd like to, no longer be. It's like, it's interesting. You said the bony finger, and I think of that, like that, the ghost of the future or whatever, ghost of Christmas is to come, or whatever you call him. Like, every single time he's sort of like the Grim Reaper, or he points at the grave with that bony finger.
That's Saturn.
That's
one face of Saturn.
Yeah. I think Saturn was one of the things too. Sorry, keep going. But when I was saying what are all the things going on, Saturn was definitely playing a part.
Well, as a Sagittarius, you're getting Saturn now. You guys are the selected group now to receive Saturn in their home.
Yes.
But I guess I forgot what I was going to say. But going back to even before we started recording, when you said, why is it that we have all these tools of transformation and we seem to be in the same spot?
Right.
Which is just true. We have a more wealth of anything than we ever had in human history. And I think too, I go back to Saturn on this one. I think it has to do with time. And I think we are very much in love with speed. And so now, and not that I don't believe that transformation can't happen quickly. I think much more quickly than it could ever happen before, because we're much more ready. We have many more tools to help us take it down, build it up again. But I think there's still an element of time and integration that we may be bypassing. And I think that's why I go through Saturn many times in the chart, because Saturn is that teacher too that says, oh, you didn't bring your homework? Your dog ate it? Well, go there and do it again.
Right.
So there's no escape. And so in many ways, no matter what, even if somebody says to you, 3 easy steps to fill in the blank, there's still that element of Saturn saying things that have a sense of time. They need to mature. There's a maturation process. And in my last podcast, I talked about Jupiter a lot, which has to do with integration. You can't just expand and not integrate.
Right.
And so I think I feel what's missing many times in all the self-development tool and whatever's out there is that people just want to be like, yes, fix me. But it's a two-way street. And there's also that time to integrate. But
right.
in our culture, we're like, no.
Right.
We can even have vacation, right?
Yeah, exactly. I'm supposed to heal overnight, or I'm supposed to be able to just instantly manifest something. I know that I was actually just taking a workshop the other day with a brilliant woman about manifestation, and she was talking about all the different levels, and spiritual and mental and emotional and physical. And she said, physical is the most dense form of energy we have. It
Yeah.
travels much slower than anything else, and it takes more time for it to show up. We think that because we've been taught that you manifest instantly, that if we try to manifest, or we set an intention to manifest something physically in the physical world and it doesn't show up instantly, that it didn't work. But it travels slower. There is such a thing as time. And I know something that another thing that I learned from someone else was, she said to me, she said, it was really brilliant. She said, how do you know when time is present? Like, what's the purpose of time? And I was like, oh, well, I don't know. I'll have to think about that. And I sort of rambled. She said, easy, I'll tell you. Time is how you know when love is not present. When love is present, there's no sense of time. When fear is present, you're very aware of time. So basically what you're saying is that we're afraid of time. We're afraid of
time.
integrating.
We want to control time.
Yeah, exactly. And if we just accepted and loved that there's integration and a process, then we would notice it and we would just be happy that we're growing and expanding. It's a mindset. It's like a whole, it's so interesting. And I know it from my own experience, because this year, back in October, I left New York and I moved out of my apartment and I was ready to buy a house. And I just told you, I'm looking at houses now. And it took me a year to get to the point where I was ready to where I was physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually prepared to buy the house. And it took me a year. And when I first moved out, I was so angry because I wanted it fast. And I was like, but I left New York and I'm supposed to get a house. And all I wanted was to get from point A to point B. And I was completely unaware of, I was aware, but I was resistant and a little bit sort of acting like a brat about the fact that there was an integration piece. There was deep digging that needed to happen. There was all of this stuff that was necessary in order to move into that next phase. So, it's so true that we don't want that. We want instant microwave now.
Instant. And it's interesting because Saturn is considered the Lord of time, the Lord of karma. He's the last, the last visible planet before we cross the boundary into the other planets. And I think that's a really key element, because there's a sense that he's the gatekeeper, saying before you can cross into the wider universe, the buck needs to stop here, and you have to do the work before I reward you with all the golden grace that I can give you. Because the flip side of Saturn in mythology is that he was also the god of the golden age. So we tend to see Saturn as the cold, bony finger, but there is that flip side of that archetype, which is, I will reward you if you do the work. Put in the time and I'll reward you. And so I think there's a sense that we're missing that element of we want it now. Everything is fast relief, right?
Right.
And so I think we are also a product of the time as well. And I think the awareness perhaps we need to kind of build in as we embark on whatever self-development and love journey we want to do, is that the more you dig, yes, you get to more rewards, but it also takes a bit of time, even if it's a short time, but it takes some time.
It takes time. Yeah, that's so interesting. I didn't know that about Saturn, but the one of the other people that I've spoken to about astrology, and she's someone that's done my chart for me before, she would always talk about Saturn as the great teacher. She never talked about karma, but I think it's really cool because with karma, you think about, I remember someone else told the story, and someone asked him the question, what's the difference between, was it karma? or like, how do you generate karma? What's the meaning of karma? I'd have to go back and watch this it's like a 2-minute video. But he talks about it, and he says, karma is created by the 5 senses.
Mm.
And anything else, come from the heart, meaning like with the right intentions, good intentions, pure of heart. That's not karma. That's the only way to not create karma. If you're using your 5 senses, you are. So I definitely, I just think there's so much in what you just said about Saturn and the way we see it, that, it's like acceptance, it's love, it's understanding, it's all of those things. Like, that's the work we put in. And, I had a spiritual teacher. I studied with this man for quite some time. And, I remember him saying over and over again, like, I will not do your homework for you. I do not do your homework.
Yeah.
And so many people would go to him and say, I need help, save me, heal me, give me the answer, blah, blah, blah. And they would keep coming back and coming back and coming back. And he would say, I'm here for you, but I will not do your homework. Go figure it out for yourself.
I think that's, to me, how I see the karma element in Saturn. I mean, there's so many ways to interpret karma. It's such a topic just in itself.
Yeah.
But to me, it's that ability. What did you plant? What seeds did you plant? How did you tend that seed? That's how Saturn gets you. It's like, did you do your homework? Did you do it well? Then you deserved a good grade. If you didn't, well, you got to go back. I think that, to me, that's the karma thing of, like, how much did you invest in it? And It's true. He won't do your homework.
Right. No, Saturn won't. We can't. And I think that's the frustrating piece of it, is because we want the quick fix, and so how we begin to start kind of maybe embarking on the next chapter. I one of the reasons why I love doing these conversations and these roundtables is because whether I'm sitting with 6 people or talking to one specific person who happens to be an expert on a specific topic, I kind of I enjoy the fact that we're sort of, it's like we're taking the lid off the soup pot or whatever it is that's been cooking all these years. And we're kind of like stirring it up, and some of the stuff that's been down at the bottom is coming to the top, or, we're kind of like shaking the bag, because I feel like we've kind of had all of these beliefs or these perceptions for so long. And even spirituality, even the new age is exactly what you said. Like, we do have an opportunity to redefine the way we do things. And I think that one of the most brilliant things that you've been sharing is that it's so much more empowering when you have these tools, right? Like, when I began to understand, and I'm not an astrologer, and like, I can look at my chart, I really don't know what it means. I have to have an expert.
A bunch of glyphs.
I'm like, what is all this? I don't know. But I have to have it interpreted or read to me by someone who's an expert until I, have the time to invest and learn how to read charts. But it was a tool that helped me better understand myself. And it's not like you can predict the future with astrology. It's not like, I know there's certain things, like I would sort of chuckle because someone would read my chart and they'd say, this is your destiny. And like, this is where you're going, or you're not going to get, like, I remember last year, or at some point I had my chart read, and she said something like, she said something about where I was. And then she said, you're starting now to really understand X, Y, and Z, but you're not really going to get there until, August of 2016. And I was like, what? But I thought I figured it out. You're telling me it's going to take me till August 2016 to get it? And now I understand more, because I've been through the process where I can look back and say, I know what she meant, because what she meant was that things would be clearer and I would be more comfortable in owning myself. Like, that's what she was saying. She wasn't saying by August 2017, you're going to be a millionaire. She wasn't telling me the future. She was showing me sort of the road sign of, like, when you get to this point, something will be different, but not.
That's why I call the chart the roadmap. It's like, but you still have to drive that car, and you have to be willing to dialogue.
Right.
I mean, there are ways, like I said, there are different astrology you can predict, you can forecast, but I think, to me personally, the best use I find is in understanding the cycle and understanding the possibility. So by you being open to listening and engaging in that conversation, it's as if the archetypal planets are coming to you and now they can dialogue with you instead of showing up in your life, knocking on the door as an event.
Mm-hmm.
Straight up, and you're like, why is this happening to me?
Exactly. Yeah.
In some ways, it's about the event or whatever it is. It's trying to engage you in the conversation, a dialogue of like, okay, Katie, this is going to need to take shape for you to get that.
Right.
Engaged with it.
Right. Yeah. It's exactly, like, it's kind of like what you said. It's like you become the player in the play instead of like you're an active participant as opposed to a spectator watching it go by. I spent so much time. I was an excellent victim. Like, I was a great victim, and I loved telling the stories, like, oh my God, you guys will never believe what happened to me this time, blah, blah, blah. Like, so many things happened to me. I had this laundry list. I was hit by a car. I was attacked on the street. I was robbed 3 times. I was this, I was that. And it all that stuff stopped when I said, okay, you know what? Let's get control of this. Let's understand this.
Yeah.
And it helped me. So I think that that's exactly what you're saying. It's an empowering tool.
Yeah, it's an empowering tool. Now, the flip side of that, it can be a crutch.
Right.
It can be a crutch where people are like, well, I have Saturn and Venus together. I will never find love. Yeah. Well, not really, it's not quite like that. You can't just say, oh, because I'm a Gemini, that's how I am.
Right.
Take it or leave it.
All the time. I hear that. Like, well, because I'm yeah, exactly.
Or the classic one that is happening right now. Mercury is retrograde. So then all sorts of anything could be blamed under that. Right. Mercury is retrograde. So poor Mercury gets everything, right?
Right.
So I think so many things, at the end of the day, I think, and this is where I find the chart, especially the rising sign, is how it's the window in which you approach life and you see the world. And so a lot of it, I think and this is where it's challenging and we don't want to do it. It's when all this stuff is happening to you and you have to have that moment of come to Jesus and be like, okay, who was in those events? What was the common denominator? Ooh, me. Something about me, right? I mean, why all those things were happening? One thing was the common denominator, and it was me. This is where it's challenging, that we have to stop and be like, there's something about me. What's going on?
Right. And not feel guilty about that, because I know that, like, that was the biggest journey for me, was like not being upset, not being like, oh, there's something about me and it's so bad and like I hate myself. More like, okay, let's just like take a friendly look at this and figure out what is it about me and how can I turn it upside down? Like, how can I take what's so shitty right now and turn it into a positive by getting some more information? It's like, I love everything you said. This has been so amazing. We're coming up on almost an hour of chatting. Yeah. Amazing. Cause whenever I'm like, I could talk about this stuff forever and ever and ever and ever. It's so fascinating, so amazing. But, some of the most incredible things that we talked about are these ways to kind of just shake it up. And one of the most important things is, I'm so glad you said it at the end. It cannot become a crutch. But the thing is, there's so many things in our lives that we can either use to sort of better ourselves and empower ourselves, or it can become a crutch and we can sort of stay stuck. We did not cover anything that would allow astrology to be of that nature. I think there's so much that was said about how it can really like help you change your life and appreciate things and accept yourself and realize your potential.
Yeah, I think just because I know we're coming up on time, I think the first thing that I find astrology can help with self-love and getting self-discovery? Well, first of all, you have your map right there of all your challenges and growing edges, but all the gifts you got in potentiality that you could tackle. It's all of a sudden you find yourself that you're not just one, but you have a host of helpers with that. Second, I think that the more I see and study astrology and look at all of this with clients is that once you understand your rhythm and you get into you understand your cycles and what cycle you're in right now, then that has to do with the transits and all that. You kind of get to see, you get more control, you're more in the driver's seat of what you can do. And you allow yourself to embrace more what's going on, even if it's challenging. And then I think it also opens up to a much bigger perception of yourself, because now you know that you can always go deeper and deeper into, and there's always more. And so you have, I think, really, and also you start noticing the astrological elements around you. You understand people better. You understand all, so I think it's an important too, is like, if you're going to go backpacking in Europe or wherever it is, it's good to have a guidebook, a pretty solid guidebook. And I think astrology is sort of the entry point before you go into, anything. And it could be a tool to use throughout the process.
Right. Oh, I love it. I love it. Thank you so much. This has been
welcome.
Amazing. So just tell me again, or share with everyone again, where your website and all this stuff will be linked below. And is there anything that you like, that you like to give away for people when they get started? Like is there anything that they should be looking for in particular on your website to jump on a list?
So if people sign up for my newsletter, they get an e-coloring book that you can print and color all the astrological, I call them the zodiac medallions, the glyphs of the signs. I'm working on my second coloring book / workbook, which was going to be about the sun's heroic journey. That's coming out the end of October. You can join my Facebook group, which is Liminal Astrology. And this week, actually, once a month, I'm doing these liminal talks on certain astrological topics that just to help people get to learn and understand. And sign up, check it out. I got my podcast too on iTunes. So, and it's Liminal Astro Coach, your astrological coach. I can't remember sometimes. But check it out. And I think, which is my belief in my own business in life, that really we are midwives to each other's dreams. So everybody going through their own process is really helping other people as well. So you go through your process, you're helping more people. Mm-hmm. And it creates a ripple effect. And I think I would say this is the positive side of I don't know if we're quite yet in the Aquarian age. We're definitely entering it. We don't know. We don't have a date for it. But I think this is the thing. Everybody's becoming more aware that, hey, it starts with me. And once it's me, I can help. It ripples out. Right. And I think that would be.
I love that. That's such a beautiful way to end. That's sort of like, I always say, I love you as I love me, and we love we. That's sort of how I always I sign off on a lot of videos and emails that way, because it's the same thing of you, me, we. We're all in it together, and it's sort of that mirroring process. Well, thank you so much. This is
welcome. Thank you for having me over.
This is the best. This is like my favorite thing in the world to do. And everyone will be able to find the links to everything below. And you can always also join the collective for free, the Loving to Be Me collective. And that link is there as well. These videos live in there, and also all over the place. So thank you. Thank you.
There are many doors.
There's many doors to find us. But check out Vanessa's work. Amazing, brilliant wisdom. I'm honored and humbled, and thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.